Yes, it's time for another You Asked For It. This is where I respond to a comment or a request of some sort wanting to compare a bunch of vehicles. So in this case, this is based on a comment from a video that I did a few months ago, Cheap Utes Compared, where I compared the GWM Canon, LDV T60 and the SsangYong Musso. The comment comes from Simon Donaldson 4762. It goes on to say, it'd be good if you could do a comparison in the same way between the Rexton LDV D90 and the Mahindra XUV 700. So what I'm going to do is compare basically the cheapest 7-seat SUVs you can buy in Australia. Now for this, I'm going to focus on the 4x4 versions because you can get rear-wheel drive versions of some of these, which brings down the price a little bit. But for this, I thought I'd just focus on the 4-wheel drive versions, and it kind of works out well because I haven't actually driven the Mahindra XUV 700, so I can't really comment on how that drives or how that behaves. But we'll have a quick look at the prices anyway. It is a little bit smaller by the looks of it compared with the SsangYong Rexton LDV D90, and I'm going to chuck in the GWM Tank 500 into the mix as well. We'll also touch on the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport and the Isuzu MU-X later on. To get started, let's check out the price tags. Oh, sorry, there's a guy that's doing some cutting or something, grinding some tiles or something across the road, so if you can hear that, apologies. Yes, the Mahindra XUV 700 is very cheap. In fact, I think it's the cheapest 7-seat SUV you can buy in Australia at the moment, at the time of this recording anyway. It starts from $36,990 drive away, so that's pretty awesome price tag for a big vehicle that you can chuck 7 people inside. But for that, you're getting a 2-litre petrol, turbo-petrol, 4-cylinder, 6-speed automatic front-wheel drive. Just to give you a bit of an idea of its size, it measures just under 4.7 meters long, while models like the SsangYong Rexton 4.85 meters long, and then the LDV D90 5 meters long. So yeah, it's quite a smaller vehicle, smaller package. As I said, I haven't driven it, I haven't sat inside, so I don't know what the space is like, but I'm guessing 150 millimeters minimum is it's going to be less legroom for the rear passengers for sure. So from now on, we'll just focus on the other three. And I'm going to look at the cheapest 4x4 version because I think this market segment, 4x4 is the whole point of going into this market segment, I think anyway. Otherwise, just better off with a wagon or a crossover or something like that. In saying that, these are just literally the cheapest 7-seat SUVs on the market. Just because they're heavy duty doesn't mean that's what people want. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to look at the cheapest 4x4 versions. So we've got the SsangYong Rexton ELX 4x4. And then to get 4x4 with the LDV D90, you have to step up to the Executive turbo-petrol engine, while the Rexton is a diesel engine. And then the cheapest GWM Tank 500 is the Lux Hybrid 4x4 turbo-petrol engine with hybrid technology. And the SsangYong wins because, apart from the Mahindra, it's priced from $50,000 even drive away, while the LDV D90 Executive is $51,042 drive away. By the way, I'm getting my specs and prices off Redbook, so a lot of these brands have special runaway deals and all that sort of run-out deals, on their website. So I'm not going to go through and look at those because it's a bit more timely. They have limited time offers and all that sort of thing. This video, it could be a bit more long term. So I'm just looking at the standard retail price as listed on Redbook. But in this case, I'm just going to give the SsangYong the win because it's just the standard retail price. Next up, we've got fuel consumption. Now, the SsangYong is diesel, the LDV is petrol, and the GWM is hybrid. So a bit of a mixture there with the powertrains. The SsangYong is rated at 8.7 litres per 100 kilometres, the LDV 9.4 litres per 100 kilometres, and then the Tank 8.5 litres per 100 kilometres. The Tank 500 is a weird one because the 2-litre turbo and the electric motor assist produces a combined 255 kilowatts, which is a decent amount of power. It's pretty much the most powerful of these kind of entry-level SUVs. But as we've seen with the 0 to 100 performance test, it really matters where the battery level is, and the battery fluctuates all over the place when you're driving along. I just did one 0 to 100 test and then straight away one back to back, and it was significantly slower straight away. So If you're driving up along, or even just a bit of a steep hill, up a bit of a highway, and then it flattens out, and then it goes up again, you're going to have less power there straight away, pretty much. But the fuel consumption of 8.5, I don't think that's very good. Now, I've heard some people say this hybrid is for performance, it's not for economy, which I think is a load of crap. No car manufacturer introduces or develops complicated and expensive hybrid tech purely for performance. Even McLaren, you know, the Formula One cars, that's not there for performance. That's there to adhere to rules and regulations. So I don't quite take that as an excuse. Even so, 8.5 is the lowest of these three specifically, only just though. It's worth noting that the GWM Tank 500 does offer the best or longest range out of these. So if you fill up the tank, its potential range is just over 1,000 kilometers, while the SsangYong is 805 kilometers and the LDV is 798. So very, very similar actually, the latter two, but the GWM 200 kilometers extra out of a tank. It has an 80 litre tank, while the LDV has a 75 litre tank and the SsangYong has just 70 litres. So if the SsangYong had a bigger tank, it'll have a pretty good range, given that its fuel consumption is very close to the GWM. With the diesel, it's just that it has a smaller tank that it doesn't get quite as far. Average emissions output, if you're wondering. So again, this is where I think the GWM falls down a little bit, considering it's a hybrid. If you look at any other hybrid, you'll see much bigger immediate benefits or on-paper benefits. I'm not saying it's, you know, not going to be less economical in the real world or more economical in the real world. I just mean on paper. The combined CO2 is 199 grams per kilometre, while the LDV petrol is 219 grams per kilometre, so it's only a little bit more. And then the SsangYong is 223 grams per kilometre. So it's not a huge difference between the three, but I know that some fleet companies have a maximum of 200. So if you are kind of falling in that category, then the GWM 199 falls below that threshold. What about performance? Well, specifically the 0 to 100 times that I've recorded with a V-Box, the GWM is quickest, which it should be, 255 kilowatts, 7.71 seconds, and that's with a kind of mid-range of battery left. If you top it all the way up, it might be quicker. I think other testers have scored a quicker result with a full battery, I'm guessing. But 7.7 is kind of an average result. That's why I've used that as the main figure. But that's the quickest I saw as well. So if you let the battery go right down, the performance drops quite a bit. And then the next quickest, the LDV D90 with the turbo-petrol engine, 9.76 seconds, 0 to 100, followed by the SsangYong, 10.11 seconds. So all pretty similar, kind of, or the latter two are at least similar, and then the GWM Tank is obviously quicker. Next up, interior and space. So I think these three are very similar in terms of space. The LDV D90 and the Rexton have a better sense of spaciousness, if that makes sense. Like when you sit inside, it just feels more open and airy compared with the Tank 500. In saying that though, the Tank 500 is definitely more luxurious. It's got some fine materials, soft materials pretty much everywhere you look and feel. It definitely has a more upmarket theme about it. The new LDV D90 does present well as well. It's got this sort of flat center console area. The gear shifter's moved up to the steering column, and you've got a nice big touchscreen across the dash. The SsangYong is starting to show some age, particularly that steering wheel. It looks like it's from the 90s or something like that, but it still has a nice big touchscreen, a lot of metallic trimmings as well, which kind of, it looks pretty cool and classy, but at the same time it might be a bit aged. It's very practical though. So the LDV, I mean the SsangYong is probably the most practical, just because it has big cup holders and big storage pockets and so on. The LDV is closely followed behind. It might even be similar. It does have dual wireless phone chargers as well with the new model, which is pretty cool. And then the Tank 500, as I said, it's more luxurious focused. The center console is very chunky, but doesn't have heaps of space there. Some big buttons and so on, which is great. I like having buttons rather than just having to dig into touch screens. And it's got this kind of fake wood trim across the dash. It just looks really nice, I think, the Tank 500. In terms of rear seat space though, I think the LDV and the SsangYong edge ahead just a little bit. The Tank 500 is more of a a typical SUV shape, like an old Prado or something like that, whereas the D90 and the Rexton are very much big, long wagons with tall ceilings or tall roof layouts. So it just has better space, and again, comes back to that sense of spaciousness. So if you're sitting in the third row, the SsangYong has a slightly reclined seat, but not much leg room. Your legs do drop down a little bit, but yeah, there's not much foot room. Whereas the LDV D90, it has a decent amount of leg room and headroom. I think it probably wins. In fact, I think the LDV D90 does win in terms of overall space. The third row is properly usable for adults, whereas the SsangYong, the tight leg room does make it a bit squishy, and then the Tank 500, it's more luxurious. You've got cup holders back there, but it's a bit confined. It just feels like you're sitting in a small third row rather than a proper seat. If we look at the maximum boot space, you've got just over 1,800 litres in the SsangYong, 2,382 litres in the LDV, and then just 1,459 in the Tank 500. So as I said, the Tank 500 is more of like a not small, but it's like a traditional four-wheel drive, you know. It's just a kind of stubby wagon, if you like, whereas the other two are definitely very long and, well, actually, let's have a look at the overall length. The Tank 500 still is over 5 meters long, but for some reason it's just packaged a bit differently. The SsangYong has more boot space, maximum boot space with all three rows down. So overall, what I think wins the interior and space, if you're after a 7-seat SUV and you want, you know, space is an important factor, like you're going to be using the 7 seats all the time, then the LDV D90 is the biggest, in my opinion. I think the interior is pretty nice as well, the latest model. It's got some good technology like the wireless charging pads and a nice big touch screen, but it's not intrusive. It's kind of, yeah, it's all pretty livable. And then the boot space is the biggest, the third row is the biggest, and yeah, I think the overall packaging is the best out of these three, specifically in this area. The GWM Tank 500 is in second, I reckon, purely because of that luxury ambience. It's definitely a very fine interior compared with these three especially, which just pushes it above the SsangYong, whereas the SsangYong does offer a bit more room. It's just the design and the materials are a little bit let down. It's just a little bit, it feels basic. As soon as you get inside, you feel like this is a bit of a basic vehicle. It's still quite good for its price. Remembering that price, sorry, you're getting quite a lot of packaging for that price. But yeah, just in terms of scoring, the interior and space, I'll leave the SsangYong to third position. Just while we're speaking about carrying loads and so on, or kind of, let's check out the towing capacities and capabilities. Max towing rating for the SsangYong is 3.5 tons, while the other two are 3,000 kilograms. So if you are looking to tow something very, very heavy, the SsangYong does look good on paper with 3.5 ton rating. But if we factor in the gross combination mass, then it looks a little bit different. So the gross combination mass is the maximum allowed weight that vehicle can carry and tow. So it will calculate, what we'll do is we'll calculate we'll get the gross combination mass minus the max towing minus the curb weight. Won't worry about tow bar weight and all that sort of stuff. Just want to look at these main figures. This is what you're allowed to carry in the vehicle, including passengers, any gear, or extra water tanks or whatever. This is what you're allowed to carry. The gross combination mass in the SsangYong is pretty high, 6,460 kilograms, leaving 830 kilograms once you minus the max towing and the curb weight, which is pretty good. 830 kilograms is enough for 5 or 6 passengers, 7 passengers even, and a little bit of gear, but not that much. Then the LDV. The LDV is the weakest here. You're left with, let's just grab the gross combination mass, 5,700 kilograms, not a very big figure, minus the curb weight, just under 2.3 tons, and then the max towing, you're left with 415 kilograms, which is not that much. You hook up a maximum 3-ton trailer, you can only carry 415 kilograms worth of things, including passengers. The winner though is the GWM, surprisingly. It has a huge gross combination mass, 6,705 kilograms. It is a heavy vehicle, 2.6 tons, but even so, that big GCM means a good leftover payload. So we just calculate minus the 3,000 kilogram towing, you're left with 1,100 kilograms of payload. That's massive. So if you want to tow 3 tons, You've still got over a ton that you can carry on board in the trailer or in the cabin, whatever. That's pretty good. It is worth keeping in mind though that the SsangYong is able to tow 3.5 tons. So if you minus off that extra 500 kilograms, you know, the SsangYong does come up better. It's about 1,300 kilograms of payload if you just tow at 3 tons. So overall, I think I have to award the SsangYong the win, because if it's on an even playing field, they're all towing 3 tons, you're left with more payload in the SsangYong. It's just that the SsangYong can tow 3.5 tons, which I think is a benefit as well. So if you really need to tow something heavy, like you're just a one-off situation where you want to tow something quite heavy, you can do it in the SsangYong. But then in every other condition, you can tow 3 tons and still have plenty of payload left over. And then lastly, we're just going to look at the off-road figures and details. SsangYong has 203 millimeters of ground clearance. The LDV has 246 millimeters, which is pretty good. And then the GWM 224 millimeters. I think the LDV with the ground clearance, I mean, even with the ground clearance, is pretty good, but I would probably say the GWM is better off-road. It has some crazy gadgets inside, diff locks and so on. It's just that battery. When I took it off-road last year, it's that battery level really makes a difference between how it feels. I mean, it still gets through okay. You've probably seen videos from overseas and stuff, and they go up crazy inclines and crazy tracks and so on. Although I would like to see a comparison with an equivalent vehicle next to it. You always just see these videos, just that car, nothing else compared to it. But from what I've done and what I've tested, the tyres aren't the best on the GWM. But yeah, all those gadgets, I think it does push it in front. With you've also got a better approach angle, 30 degrees approach angle in the GWM, 29 degrees in the LDV, and then just 20 degrees in the SsangYong. That doesn't sound right. 20 degrees approach angle in the SsangYong. That doesn't seem right at all. But yes, I think the SsangYong is probably the weakest in terms of off-road. It comes with pretty ordinary tyres as well, as in not off-road focused tyres. And it's got the weakest ground clearance out of these 3. If I was going to go on a big off-road expedition, I would probably take, I don't know actually, I like the GWM with all those gadgets, but I don't know if I fully trust it, and it's a bit annoying, that battery level. I mean, I have to award the GWM the win, but if it was me and I was going on a big long trip, I probably would take the SsangYong just because it has a nice trusty diesel engine, whereas the LDV has good approach angles and all that kind of thing, but you've got that petrol engine, not much torque, or not as much torque as the others. Let's just have a quick look at that. You've got 410 Newton meters, which is pretty good, but it's available from, well, actually 2,500 RPM to 3,500 RPM. That's a nice wide spread for a petrol engine, 184 kilowatts. So you've got a decent amount of power there. But then the SsangYong, 441 Newton meters from 1,600 RPM to 2,600. And then the GWM, it's a weird figure, combined figure, 658 Newton meters. So yeah, the GWM definitely most power and most torque. It's the quickest, but it depends on that battery level. It does have the most gadgets though, so I think I'm going to have to award the GWM the win there, or not have to. It clearly is better dimensions, better off-road figures, and the off-road modes and gear. It's the better off-roader in my opinion. I'd just change those tyres. They don't seem like a good fit for that style of vehicle with all those different modes. Get some all-terrains on there and it'll probably go quite well. And then lastly, my favourite, resale value. I know this is a bit controversial and I know people get angry about it. Like, you know, why do you care about resale value? You're buying the car, you enjoy the car, which is fair enough. That's totally fair enough. But I think for a run-of-the-mill vehicle, resale value is a factor at least, and it's worth considering anyway. If you don't care about it, then forget about this whole section. But yeah, it's all exciting buying the vehicle. When it comes time to sell, it's, you know, that helps you buy your next vehicle. And I'm in a sort of similar boat. I've got a BMW X3. We bought it new, and it's just plummeted in value. It's worth less than half what we paid for it, that's annoying, but I like the vehicle, so that's kind of a bit of a trade-off you have to make. What I'm going to do is look at 2020 models and the top spec variants, just to give us a nice contrast and to give us a good figure. So when the price is high to start with, you're probably going to get a little bit more back in the long run, kind of, I think. But anyway, it's just easier if I can search for top spec models in the past. Some of these are MY19, I think. I'll explain more as we come across each vehicle, but I couldn't find a specific MY20 for some of them, or one of them at least. But anyway, let's have a look. So SsangYong MY20 Rexton Ultimate, the top spec model, the diesel version. It was $52,990 when new, drive away, and now the average resale value, so that's the two price guide prices combined and then averaged out, is $25,100. That means after 4 or 5, coming up to 5 years, you retain 47.3% of that initial new price. Next up, the LDV, the top spec, is the Executive with the turbo diesel as well. This is the pre-facelifted model, obviously. It's different design, whatever. It was $47,990 drive away when new, and now the average price, the two prices there combined and averaged out, $23,225, which spits out a percentage of 48.3%. So you're holding on just to that 1% more value after 4 or 5 years of ownership. And then for the GWM, obviously the Tank 500 hasn't been around for 4 or 5 years. So what I'm going to do is just compare the GWM Cannon Ute, the top spec Cannon L. This is not, an accurate way to do it, but it's the only thing I can do. There's no other models I can compare. I've got the top spec Cannon L. Price was $37,990 when new, so quite a bit less than the rest of these. And then the average selling price, $21,350. But that spits out a retained percentage of 56.1%. So that's held its value the best out of these three. Again, I'm comparing a ute to an SUV. So utes typically hold their value better than SUVs, as they're just a bit more demanding, I suppose. Anyway, that's a figure we can kind of take as a guide. There's no other way to do this, as I said, so I don't know what else to do. So what do those figures look like against some of the established players? Well, I'm going to look at the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport Exceed, the four-wheel drive top spec diesel. Its price was $57,190 new, and then the resale value now, or the resale guide, is $36,050. That means it's retained 63% of its value. So straight away, that's much higher than the rest of those other ones. Then we'll look at also the Isuzu MU-X LST. This is the top spec model back then. $57,400 when it was new. Average price now, $39,900. That means it's retained 69.5% of its value. So almost 70% of its value after 4 or 5 years. That was an MY19 model as well. So 2020 MU-X, but MY19. I think there's a gap where they had the 2020 model run for 2 years, and they brought out the MY21 in later 2020. I think that's what's happened there. But anyway, that's 70% for an MY19 model. That's a clear winner in terms of resale value there. So what about those two models actually? Well, the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, the cheapest model, the GLX, prices start from $51,540. So that's a pretty good value vehicle actually. It's not priced that much higher than the rest of these three. You're getting good running gear, trusted turbo diesel engine, 8 litres per 100 kilometres fuel consumption, which is lower than all of those three, including that Tank 500 hybrid, although it is petrol, the Pajero Sports diesel. 8 litres per 100, that gives you an average range of 850 kilometres. So that's good as well compared with those others. 68 litre fuel tank, small fuel tank compared with those others, but because it's got good economy, it goes quite well. Combined emissions, 212 grams per kilometre, also quite good compared with those others, apart from the Tank 500, which is $199. I think that's a pretty good deal, and it does come with 10-year warranty if you service it at Mitsubishi, which all three others cannot compete with. That's probably one that I would definitely, it is one that I would definitely consider. If I was looking for this type of thing, straight away, test out the Pajero Sport, see how you like it. It is getting a bit old now. The interior doesn't have the clever tech, especially against the GWM Tank 500. It doesn't have the luxurious features. This is the GLX I'm looking at, which is the base model. So it's definitely not, it doesn't have the wow factor of the Tank 500 or even the other two models. It's pretty basic inside. But yeah, if you just want a family-friendly 7-seat SUV, decent room in the third row as well, Pajero Sport GLX is definitely worth looking into. So what about the MU-X? Well, they offer you can get that in rear-wheel drive, like some of the others. The LDV D90, you can get rear-wheel drive as well. But we're just looking at 4x4. So if you look at the 4x4 1.9 turbo diesel, that's priced from $53,400, a bit more than the GLX Pajero Sport. But in my opinion, you're better off stretching to the 3 litre. It's only $2,000 more and you get more power and torque. It's probably going to be better for resale, better for towing, better for off-roading, and obviously better performance. $55,400. It is a bit more expensive compared with those others. $50,000, yeah, $51,000. The Tank 500, $66,000. But yeah, it's about $5,000 more than the others. $5,000 is not that much. And coming back to that resale value, you're going to get more of it back anyway. So if you can just stretch $5,000 more, the MU-X is definitely worth considering. Check it out, take it for a drive. The touchscreen isn't the best. The interior is a little bit crude and a bit basic, a bit like the Pajero Sport. But yeah, you're getting trusted running gear, trusted company as well. You're not getting the 10-year warranty. Yeah, I don't know. I think if it was my choice out of all these 5 models, excluding the Mahindra because I haven't driven it, although as I said, it's not really in the same type of vehicle. All of those other 3, let me just double check that for you, are drive-away prices. So the GWM is $66,000. I think that's out straight away. I don't think that's going to win here, even though it does have good tech and it's got the most powerful engine. I just think $66,000 is very pricey for an entry-level SUV. It doesn't have the best space inside, although the interior is very luxurious, very nice technology and all that. I think it was my money, that would be on the bottom of the list out of these sort of 5 models because it is expensive. It's $15,000 more than the SsangYong and the LDV and $10,000 more than a very good MU-X LSM 3 litre engine. So yeah, straight away that's out for me. Although it is impressive, the price is just too high. Coming in 4th place, I think the SsangYong. It's quite a good, neat and tidy package. It's easy to drive and all of that. I like the turbo diesel engine, but it falls down a little bit with off-road capability, and it also falls down a bit with the 3rd row seat space. Although it is the cheapest here, I think it's in 4th position because of those factors. Not that it's a terrible vehicle. I think it's actually quite nice, but out of these 5, that's where I place it in 4th. That leaves the LDV D90 in 3rd position. I think the new model is definitely an improvement over the previous model. It's just a shame that it comes with a turbo-petrol engine and not a diesel. That's going to impact fuel consumption in the long run, but you know, some people don't like diesels. Like my dad doesn't like diesels. He thinks they're like, you know, in the 70s where you had lots of smoke and so on blowing out of the back. Yeah, so I understand that some people don't want a diesel. This is, you know, this caters for them nicely. It's also got good power, 184 kilowatts. The price is right, $51,000 drive away, and it looks good now. I think it does anyway. And it's got plenty of features inside, and above all, the most space out of pretty much all of these 5 models, I reckon. It's just, yeah, very spacious inside. It is a proper 7-seater. And then 2nd position, for me anyway, is the Pajero Sport. I think it's a great package. I love the 4-wheel drive system that you can, you know, drive on the tarmac and all that. I just think it's a little bit aged inside, and I think the design is a little bit polarizing. I'm not completely convinced. I think the next gen model, which is just around the corner, will be one to look out for. But right now, I would place the Pajero Sport in 2nd. That leaves the good old Isuzu MU-X in 1st place. If I was going to buy a 7-seat SUV, cheap 7-seat SUV, sorry, then I would just try and stretch to the MU-X LSM with the 3 litre engine. If you can't stretch that far, then you can get the MU-X with rear-wheel drive from $47,400, excluding on roads. So if you add on roads in New South Wales, you're looking at roughly $52,099. So just a little bit more expensive than the LDV and about $2,000 more expensive than the SsangYong. $2,000 when you're looking at spending $50,000. I think that's nothing. I think it's worth paying for. And again, that resale value, you're going to get that back, or you're probably going to get that difference back when it comes time to sell. I think it will sell quicker as well. So there's how much you get for it and how quick it will sell. Again, I'm in the same boat with my car. I don't imagine I'm going to be able to sell a second-hand BMW very quickly at all. I'll probably have to trade it in and just get ripped off. But there you have it, best cheap 7-seat SUVs on the market right now. It comes up with the MU-X. If you don't want MU-X or Pajero Sport, then the LDV D90 is worth looking into, even though it does have the second poorest resale value. The SsangYong is the worst, just by 1%. But yeah, take them all for a test drive, as always, and see what suits you best. And then that way you know, because some things or some features might not be applicable to you. A dual wireless phone charger pad, for example, in the LDV, you might not like that. You might think I'm never going to use that, so it's not appealing. So, or if the third row seating space is the biggest in the LDV, that might not apply to you. In that case, the GWM might be more interesting. It's got technology and all that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, if you have any other requests, I'll do my best to put together more comparisons. Thanks for watching.